Hello and welcome to another episode of Emily Talks Tech Jobs. Today, I am beyond excited to be joined by Alireza Dorfard, Managing Director and Head of Market Data and Services at Deutsche Börse Group, one of the most important financial market infrastructure companies in the world. Alireza leads data strategy across a complex global organization that processes enormous volumes of financial data every second. He also started his career as a BCG consultant and led Mastercard's data and services team for Germany and Switzerland. So, Reza, thank you so much and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot for inviting me, and you really have something great going on. So I'm really excited to join you here in this session.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And is there anything that I missed about you, about your background?
Not really. No, I'm very simple, very, very boring me. So therefore, nothing to miss there.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I am really excited to have you here today because as you're aware, in our previous conversations, a lot of the people that I work with, a lot of my clients are in the data space. So, for everybody out there who's listening right now, today we're going to be talking very specifically to the data crowd, data professionals across the spectrum, everything from data analysts, data scientists, data engineers, even up to architects. And we're going to be talking about, the topics that generally come to me, the top questions that I get from these data professionals who are looking to land their next role right now. So there are a couple of different topics that we want to go through today. And I'll be speaking from my perspective from the recruiter's chair, basically as a former data recruiter, and Reza as a hiring manager. So that being said, let's get into it. So I'm just going to kind of go through the list with the top questions that come across my desk on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So let's start out with the big one. The biggest question that comes across my desk is what are the skills? What are the top skills that are in demand right now? And I think, for early data professionals, mid-level data professionals, actually everyone, the top skills that you need for data analytics when it comes to hard skills are always the classics, right? Start with everything from Excel, Python, SQL, a little bit of visualization, Tableau, Power BI. These are the foundational tools that everyone really needs to have a strong foundation in order to succeed. So what are the top tools that you guys use at the Börse?
Yeah, thank you very much. So maybe before I jump into, so just to explain what actually Deutsche Börse Group is, because I mean, you probably have a lot of, let's say, US people that are in your audience, and therefore, just to give, let's say, in the comparison, many potentially know NYSE or NASDAQ, which are large exchanges which, let's say, trade a lot of different instruments and assets. And similar to that, also Deutsche Börse Group has many, many exchanges in different areas from foreign exchange, commodities, derivatives, also simple stocks and ETFs. And what we are doing is commercializing and distributing the data, which means that when we talk about specifically data analysts and data scientists or data engineers, it's really about people that have a certain understanding of, I would say, the foundations that we've built in the cloud, but also have some knowledge about on-prem systems, because this transformation from on-prem to cloud is still in the process, right? We have a multi-cloud strategy. We are in Azure and also on GCP, which means that also the tools that we use sometimes have to be in different environments. Now, coming back to your question, so of course, if you think about data analysts and data scientists, really foundational is definitely that they're able to work with different databases, so know their SQL, and that they're really, really knowledgeable in Python, that they have a basic understanding of different, I would say, data analysis tools also in a cloud environment. So we are using Databricks, which bridges our Azure and GCP environment, and we are also using Power BI, for instance. But there are also teams which, for instance, have native tools like BigQuery, and on top they have Looker. So I think it really depends on the different business areas of what kind of tools are used. And you can also see that there is a big, let's say, breadth of different tool and use case usage. So I would say that the foundations are more or less always the same. And I believe if somebody really is knowledgeable in some of these areas, they are also able to do, let's say, do well in other environments. Yeah. Um, but I think what's really critical, specifically from a data science and data and analytics perspective, you can't just be, let's say, the data nerd, right? Because at the end, many of these roles are in a business environment. And of course, if you're a data engineer, maybe you can focus completely on just understanding your tech stack and have little knowledge of what the business actually is doing. But when we're talking about a data scientist or a data analyst, if they don't understand a little bit at least about capital markets, if they don't understand a little bit about what actually is the so what in the analysis that we're doing, if they don't understand what is our business goal and how does maybe the analysis that we're doing translate into business outcomes, then they will just um, boil the ocean with their analysis. They will just, let's
Right.
say, be completely overwhelmed by the tremendous petabytes of data that we have, by the unbelievable number of variables that we can potentially analyze. So there has to be a gut feeling guided by some business knowledge. Of course, this can be learned over time, but the more, I would say, experienced you are in a certain industry, the better you are at a data analyst and as a data scientist. And therefore now, looking at, let's say, me as a hiring manager, I'm looking at the foundations, but I'm also specifically not looking for some kind of insight into industry knowledge. And I think this definitely is more important for most senior roles and maybe less important for junior roles because there it's not that much expected to have industry knowledge, and we just hope that they will learn it on the job. So
Mm.
you were spot on with, let's say, the tools that you named at the beginning.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, that absolutely is the foundation. And I'm so happy that your response to the question was so diverse because you really touched on a lot of different topics that are important to data professionals. So pulling that apart a little bit more, you mentioned a lot of different specific tools, Databricks, cloud, Azure, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the questions that I get quite often is, whether it's better to be more of a generalist or go really deep in a specific tool.
Mhm.
So, for example, like, is it better for me to go really deep in Python and then, or to go really deep in Python, knowing that there are roles out there that require R?
Mhm.
And as a job seeker, I don't know exactly which company I'm going to be landing in down the road. So I need to somehow think of a strategy that's going to work for me to prepare me for a diversity of different roles. And I think, what I tend to tell job seekers is that absolutely it makes a lot of sense to go deep in one topic because the deeper you get, the richer your knowledge is of a particular topic, and they're quite transferable. So between
Mhm.
Python and R, there's like a lot of transferability. And what's probably, especially with in the environment that we are in right now, with all of these AI tools that can support coding, it's actually probably more important to go deep on a particular topic to understand the underlying concepts better, that you can then later, if you're a Python expert, you can quickly pivot to R, for example. What is your perspective on that?
I have to say that I really, really agree. Um, I would say that in our environment, specifically on the business side, maybe less in a scientific environment, because I mean, I studied math myself. I did a lot of,
Mm,
let's say, uh, I don't know, projects in R. So I understand that maybe a more scientific environment would prefer that, although they are also pivoting in the direction of Python because it's just much more flexible and integrates well with many, many other tools that are being used. And the
mhm,
support system around it is just much, much more active. So I would say Python is actually more important than R, just from my perspective. Yeah. But I really
yeah,
agree with you because coding support and also software lifecycle support, which then includes also certain data science tools, is going to become much, much more powerful going forward. And to be able to really understand a certain software stack and because, for instance, the outputs of certain large language models, specifically with respect to coding, is good. But I mean, are the is the code really efficient when you have it in production? Is it actually better to do it somehow differently to decrease compute or storage necessary to actually execute the code? And I think
Mm,
this is what makes the difference between somebody who really knows what they're doing in, I don't know,
mhm,
C++ or Python or whatever. And therefore, I would really agree with you, but at the same time, it's really hard for somebody who just comes in to be the expert in a certain language, right?
right.
And sometimes you also have to be flexible because we also know that many of the jobs that currently people at the end secure, maybe they have for a couple of years and not for eternity. It's not as if
Mm,
everybody's staying for 5 to 10 years in companies anymore. So even though you have to be an expert in something, I really believe it's important that you don't stop learning and that you have at least a rough understanding of other tech stacks and that you don't stop to look beyond the plate. And specifically
mm,
with AI powered software lifecycle tools that are out there to support you to actually get a good grasp on maybe structure or maybe differences to other languages that you're not super aware of or tech stacks you're not super aware of to just test it out because I think that gives you breadth and at the same time the depth that you need to challenge outputs of, for instance, coding support or challenge also others that come to you with a certain, I don't know, a little bit shady ideas. And I think you're right. Yeah, foundation is important, but a little bit of breadth doesn't hurt to make you flexible enough to
yeah.
pivot if you really need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the advice that I always give to job seekers is if you're going into an interview and you are an absolute, let's say, Tableau expert, and it says in the job description that they use Power BI, it's fantastic that you know Tableau and look at Power BI before the interview. Make sure you have a foundational understanding of what's going on there. Because, yes, of course, the skill is quite transferable. However, it is a different interface and it does work slightly differently. So being able to understand that on a basic level will definitely help you through the interview process.
Yes, absolutely. And I like that you at the end explain also to those mm, I would say really job seekers. In German, we say Mut zur Lücke. That means you've got to have courage to also have blank spots at the end. And
Right.
I think it's important that to know that many people who are data scientists or data analysts maybe are very, very 100% perfectionists, want to get everything right, and maybe don't want to give, let's say, any kind of gray areas in their answers, or maybe are insecure if they really have blank spots. But we're all human. So I think it's really important that the data analysts and data scientists or people that you are really coaching understand that sometimes you just have to have the courage to have blank spots. And I don't think that you should lie about it, but clearly
Yeah.
outline the transferability of your skills and actually
Right.
show exactly as you said that there
Mm.
is a lot of benefit in what you have learned and how this can be also used for whatever is needed in the company that they're applying to.
Absolutely. And something I love to have candidates do before they go into an interview is take a moment to really reflect on their skills and evaluate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, like for each particular skill.
Mhm.
So, for example, like if you go into an interview and you're asked about your Power BI skills, how strong are you in Power BI? You can really answer the question by saying, you know what, right now I'm a 3 in Power BI, but I'm an 8 in Tableau.
Mhm.
And because those are quite interchangeable, I feel very confident that I can ramp up to a 6 or a 7 or an 8 within 3 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just really be aware. And I think, being that person who says that they're 100% capable of everything is absolutely transparent that that is not the case because
Mhm.
literally, like you said, literally no one is a 10 out of 10. So for me, if you say a 10 out of 10 on all these skills, red flag.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I agree with
Awesome.
you.
Okay, great. So, we've focused quite heavily on the technical skills, but you also touched a little bit on the soft skills that are required in interacting, with different business areas. And I think in my work, with analytical people, like you said, there tends to be like that perfectionist inside them because they work a lot with, like, rows and columns. So in addition to having those really important technical skills, it's also extremely important to be able to have those communication skills, to be able to understand deeply what somebody from a different area of the business is seeing, what they're understanding, and what they need in order to move their business forward. So I always coach that soft skills, even though like you might not think about it, it is one of the top skills that I was screening for as a recruiter when I was hiring for BI. So that being said, from your perspective, like how important is that in terms of like if you had to rank it, what's more important, the hard skills or the soft skills?
Um, I think it's equally important. And I tell you why, because the soft skills are, of course, those that you named, people that are not only sitting there and coding or analyzing data. And at the end, you ask them, well, what exactly did you produce? And they are unable to clearly and structured give you an answer of what their findings or their process was, or are not really able to put this on paper. So
Mm,
storylining this, really putting this on slides potentially, because I mean, at the end, this is often required. Not being able to wrap this into a story that makes sense based also on a little bit of business judgment. I think this clearly is required. And then sitting also in a room with different people and then being able to look people in the eye and sometimes also defend what you have created and not being too insecure and just blow away as soon as a little bit of wind is in the room, is
mm,
really important for someone that starts a job. And I think, oh no, this kind of personal gravity and charisma is maybe not something that data scientists and data analysts are renowned for, but this is what we need also from a business perspective, that people stand behind what they've produced. But I have to say, if there is, let's say, one skill or characteristic that I really believe is unbelievably important for somebody in such a data analyst, data scientist, data engineering role, maybe the more tech related it is a can-do attitude. Because often it is
mm,
the case that the work that you receive is ambiguous, that there are risks, that
mhm,
are things that maybe don't work, that there has to be something produced and you don't know what the timeline is. And the thing that I really don't like is cover my ass people or too risk averse people. And I know that also
mm,
this kind of 100% attitude that you maybe were referring to also before,
mhm,
sometimes tends to push you into this corner to be a little bit defensive. So what I really like is people that tackle topics with enthusiasm, that really want to find solutions, that if there is a wall in front of them, that they jump over it, go left, right, dig through it, push through it, you know? So you really need to be someone that has the energy to get results and then can defend this.
mm,
So please, if you think about soft skills, don't only talk about communication, don't talk about only like, the active listening to know what actually the task is. Really talk about also the attitude and the enthusiasm and also the thoughtful risk taking that is necessary to actually achieve the task. Because this is the difference between those people that get promoted because they really bring not only the tech skills, but an attitude that drives the organization forward, and those that just do their job and at the end remain where they are. And I think this is also
mhm.
something that you need to cultivate as a person to really move forward.
Wow, wonderful. Yeah, that is a new perspective. And so it's clear how you are aware of that when you're already working for someone and maybe considering them for a promotion for that next role, because obviously you have a lot of insights around their work and their style and their attitude. When you're hiring an external person to come into the organization, how do you screen for that?
I have to say that, I mean, you said it before, I'm from a consulting background, right? So at BCG,
Right.
I was also in the interviewer group, so I really did
Yes.
probably I don't know how many interviews. Um, so I would say that I have a good gut feeling to ask questions around curiosity around
Mm,
how you face challenges and then react to people that potentially are also a little bit pushy. How you have maybe handled certain situations in your life or in your work that were affecting you in certain ways. So I have to say that for me, it's always easier to have a very structured approach in interviews where I also put a little bit of a case study into it, even if it's for a data scientist role, to have
mhm,
the same kind of question that I ask everyone, and then have some semblance of an, I would say, normalized answer, which I can then use to also reflect how I would grade this person on an intellectual and also structural level. But then there are all these
mhm.
soft skills that you potentially are testing, and it's very subjective. We're all humans. We've got our own perspectives, our own incentives, our own ways of doing things, and not everyone does it the same way. And you have to reflect that people are they have a lot of edges, right? And it's really the case
Yes,
of finding out that do these edges, however they are, it could be two completely different people, but do they fit to the puzzle pieces that we have within the company and the teams that we're hiring for? And that is something
mm,
that is often not a science, but an art. And sometimes you
right,
just also don't hire the right person. Um, and have to say goodbye also after some time, which is also part of
right.
the process. Yeah. And I think what's really important is that people that potentially have been laid off or realize that they are not right for this position also pivot fast on both sides, because it's really important that you go to work Monday to Friday and feel well in the environment and feel well
Yeah,
with what you're doing. So
right.
therefore it's for me, it's critical to hire someone that really reflects these soft skills, but it's not always easy to find out that if you've got the right person. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, great insights. Thank you so much for that. And, just to everybody listening out there, the reason that I like to speak with a variety of different guests on the show is because everyone has a different approach to hiring. So the, the approach that you hear Reza hiring for today and some of the types of interview questions that you hear, it's not going to be like that across the board. It's great to be prepared for that, and especially if you're looking to join his team, you already have some insider insights. But, at another company, there's a person sitting across the table from you who has had a completely different experience, who probably works maybe in a slightly different industry and just takes a different approach to hiring. So, um, it's a perspective, right?
You are so right. And it's totally refreshing that you're saying this because, I mean, I know a dozen hiring managers across the board in all of the different industries that I've worked in that are
Mm,
just different people, you know? I mean, there's
yeah,
the really, really tough guy that really wants to have the tough people in the team. And then there's the super
right.
soft, emotional person that wants to have a really good atmosphere and drives the team forward like this. I think there are a lot of leadership styles and there are a lot of team dynamics. And I think you were spot on. It's super hard for somebody who really is going into a company and wants to prepare for an interview to know what they're going to face. Because, of course, there is a
Exactly.
structured process if you want to go to Amazon or even to us in
Mm,
preparation. But when you're in front of the
right.
hiring manager, it's not as easy. Yeah. I think you're the expert on how to get in. Yeah. Because you've got a really good grasp. Because I looked at some of your former, let's say, podcasts, but also posts that you've made. I think you've got a really good grip on what are the buzzwords, what are, let's say, the structures, what are, let's say, the techniques to really get into these interviews. But if you're there, you have to prepare for a lot of different styles to actually go through. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. And along those same lines, and my last comment on this topic as well is, when we sit in that room together, a lot of times as candidates, it's really intimidating.
Mhm.
And you see this person, you see Reza sitting in front of you who has years of experience, who, is the head of a very important department in a very important company globally. And a lot of times, what I see people do is they have this kind of tendency to want to perform and to show
Mhm.
the best parts of themselves. And it can come across looking a little bit mechanic, like what I like to call the interview robot. So I tell people, what's really important, one of the things that's really, really important important for you in this conversation because you're going to have very little face time with the person who's sitting across the table from you. So,
Mhm.
one of the really most important things that you can do, aside from knowing your stuff, is being authentic, being your authentic self. And, knowing which bits of your authentic self to show, but definitely don't try to fit yourself into some kind of box and, put a square peg into a round hole because that comes across as inauthentic. And that's a person who, honestly, it's not a checkbox for me. It's more of a question mark.
You are so right. Because I think if you are in front of people that have years of experience, even let's say hiring managers like you were before in, let's say, large
Mm,
corporations, I think these people already have a radar in that sense, like some
yeah,
emotional sensitivity to feel if somebody is playing a role. Because I mean, at the end, it shows a little bit. You can be a perfect
yeah,
actor, of course, but many of us are not. How could we be? I mean, we're
right.
mathematicians, I don't know, physics students, data analysts, data engineers, whatever. We're just normal people, maybe even worse than the average in population. So therefore, um, being authentic is our tool to also show who we are and be honest, because then also the hiring manager can understand if you are a good fit for whatever the team dynamic is, because otherwise you are
Right.
potentially pretending to be something that you're not and are not happy
Mm,
in the environment that you actually land in. So I am 100% agreeing with you. At the same time, it's so hard, right? I mean, every one of us has been in this situation. You're sitting in front of the
yeah.
person that you want to be hired, let's say, at the end, and it's super hard to lower your insecurity, and therefore it's so important to train. I know that it sounds weird, but you have to go through mock interviews. You have to
Yeah.
go through some process where people train with you, and specifically if you're coming from university or you're not used to processes in larger corporations, and I don't know, come from another country and go to the States or whatever, it's so
Mm.
important that you've got somebody that guides you through this mental torture that an interview can be. Yeah, and
Oh.
emotional torture also. Um, and then you're just much more secure because you've done it a couple of times, even if it was just a test. But it gives you much more
Mhm.
confidence to be you and be as authentic as you just outlined.
Absolutely. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I really appreciate your insights on that topic. Switching now to finance. Because a lot of times, looking at salary ranges, especially in the US, you can see that there's a big salary gap sometimes between other industries and the same exact role in the finance industry. So, a lot of times, these roles are really coveted. It is competitive to get into, maybe a data science role in the finance industry. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit. So, starting out, what are some of the unique qualities that you feel that data professionals should have if they're going specifically into the finance sector?
I think that many people that are in, let's say, more quantitative roles within the capital market or financial services sector, um, really have not only a technical but really a more mathematical background. Even if they are maybe they studied physics or they studied, I don't know, chemistry or biology or really math or computer
Mhm.
science, but with a more, let's say, theoretical focus. It prepares them well for the sometimes quite complicated models that are used within financial services industry, use cases from insurance to risk management to trading, and I think all of these fields have very specific needs also. And I think if you have, let's say, a solid background from university, you're able to satisfy all of those. But I think what is important to note is that if you think about the financial services industry, this is not an industry that produces anything in that sense, right? There are
Mm,
no goods that are it's at the end in a shelf. You also don't trade something like a supermarket at the end. You don't have any supply chain in that sense. You really
mm,
create a service which is based on technology, which is based on data being one of the key ingredients of the value chain within the financial services industry. And people that work in this industry, therefore, specifically when you're talking about data or technology related roles, um, have to have a really, really good foundation. Because on the
mm,
business side, even there, I mean, we say it in our company at Deutsche Börse Group that we are i- capital market engineers. We are not just,
mm.
let's say, people here that have some commercial knowledge. No, we are the same as an architect that builds a house. We are the ones that actually are market infrastructure providers and engineer how this should look like, even on the business side. And then together with our IT and tech colleagues, implement this kind of engineering as a service for our different clients, from hedge funds, investment banks to, let's say, the largest banks within the world. And I think this also means that technology, data is such an important ingredient of the services that we offer to our clients. If somebody who is a mathematician in an insurance does a mistake in a formula or a calculation, that means that a life insurance at the end goes bankrupt, because you need to
Right.
know how this looks like. And same also
Yeah.
with a trading firm that does proprietary trading on a stock exchange or a derivatives exchange. If you have a trading model not back tested well, and suddenly you are
Mm,
trading and really are losing money, this is affecting the P&L of the overall company. So what I'm telling you is that um, these roles are not just business intelligence in the financial service industry. If you're thinking about data and tech, these roles are mm, fundamental ingredients of creating value for the company and for your end clients. And therefore,
mm,
these these engineers, these data scientists, data analysts are the assets of the firm. If they are good, you
mm,
perform well together, of course, with the business
mm.
and the IT people. But it's
Right.
so fundamental that they perform well. And that's why, going back to my initial answer, it's also important that they have some kind of business knowledge, right? And this evolves over
Yeah.
time. But having the right industry foundation really helps you to be a better data or tech related professional in our financial service industry. And that's why I would say potentially it's also easier to earn maybe a little bit more in these industries compared to maybe others, where it's just,
Mm.
let's say, maybe intelligence and there are some so whats, but it's not the key of the service provisioning to your customers.
Wonderful, yeah. And I also imagine, the regulatory nature of the industry as well, really plays a heavy role in that because if you are I think for anyone, like anyone who's out there listening, if you've ever had to dispute a transaction on your credit card, I mean, this is a really small thing, right? But if there's an error, if there's a mistake that is having this this mistakes in transactions occur at scale, this could be absolutely devastating not only for your core business, but also there could be regulatory consequences.
Absolutely. You're really
Yeah.
right. You know how it is in the financial service industry. I mean, no, really. I mean, you're spot on. You hit the nail on the head. I think, i- as you just said, um, I mean, of course, if you're in the healthcare business, you also have a lot of regulations. But
Mm,
for the data scientist or the technologist, that is maybe not so important. Rather, maybe for the person
mm,
in the lab. But
right.
in the financial service sector, exactly these technology roles, these data roles, are so important to have fulfill these regulatory requirements, which are often very, very strict. So therefore, you are spot on. For the financial service industry, really, this regulatory background makes it even more critical to have really great people
Mm.
in the tech or data sphere on the job.
Okay. And so that being said, when you look for new employees to hire, How is it? Do you find I mean, you're in Frankfurt, so I think that the pool of candidates is not small, for you in Frankfurt. It's the financial capital of Europe. But are there any gaps that you see? Is there anything that you feel like candidates who are applying for your roles at the Börse should be filling?
I mean, first of all, we are an international company. I think we've got offices all around the world, yeah,
Right.
as a Deutsche Group. But of course, many people are in Germany, as you said.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the skill gap is not really that geographical, specifically if you look at Europe or the US. If there would be
Mhm.
one thing where I would say there is a gap is or let's say not a gap, but where people I think should focus on a little bit more going forward, being a data analyst or a data scientist. Um, I'm a fan of Databricks. I think specifically for business users who are more data science oriented, it bridges also different cloud environments. Um, and I really also like, of course, the foundational capabilities of Azure and GCP, but I think they are a little bit more technology focused, a little bit more, let's say, on the engineering side. I personally have also worked a lot, let's say, with GCP and Looker. So they also have great tools, yeah, and with BigQuery. And I think what I'm seeing is that there is a shift now in also skills that more and more data scientists are actually using, is like Snowflake or Databricks. Um, and that this is maybe a skill which is currently being built, and that if I look at CVs, I don't see it that often, but would actually love people to have more skill in that area. So
Mhm.
this, I would say, is maybe a little bit of a blank spot, but let's be honest, even if you do have no idea about Databricks and you are a good, let's say, data scientist, it's not a rocket science to get into it. Yeah. So
Right.
not a big requirement, but something that I'm just observing.
Okay, wonderful. And then for, those people who are working in data science and they are, coming from a different industry and they really, really want to break into finance and capital markets. A lot of times they'll ask me, like, how can I do that? How can I make the pivot from one industry into another? And, something that I tell them is to see where you have gaps. So, for example, a lot of times data analysts, like you said, not in all industries, they're deeply mathematical roles. However, like you mentioned, finance is. So I think one of the first things that I would tell someone who doesn't necessarily come from like a bachelor's degree in math or, econometrics or, something like that, I would tell them to go back and do some kind of mathematical specialization for finance to get a stronger, like more robust foundation in the math that's required to actually run those analyses, like you mentioned. The second thing I would say is to then be really knowledgeable about industry terms and trends. Also, what's kind of top of mind of professionals who are in the financial services, capital markets industry. What would you say to them? Number one, do you find it easy? Do you find it easy to hire somebody who has a different background? And if you haven't found so many candidates from different industries in the past, what would you recommend to them?
I think if you are a little bit farther along in your career, pivoting into capital markets or financial services is only something that can really be done if you as a person have a real interest in capital markets or financial services. So let's assume you're somebody who, I don't know, has been in whatever industry, but you've got a
Mm,
brokerage account. You've always, let's say, looked at what happens in the markets. You
right.
have been trading maybe a little bit on the side. You understand what it actually means to have a stock or a bond or, I don't know, a derivative. You know what, I don't know, that sometimes when you have, let's say, bought something, it's being cleared or there is a post-trade process. If you have some fundamental understanding and interest in this
Mhm.
industry, then I think a pivot is possible because you
Mhm.
have enough motivation, enough knowledge that can be connected to it to really do the pivot. If you
Right.
are really putting in, I don't know, a master in finance on top, it's even easier, of course, because this gives you enough credibility to then do the pivot. But
Right.
if you, for instance, are just coming from, I don't know, a healthcare provider, I believe on the technology side, it might be easier, but on the business side, coming in as a data scientist or data analyst, probably a little bit harder.
Mhm.
Even people coming from a banking, just a pure banking background, going into capital markets can also be hard because banking sometimes or insurance is very, very different to some of the processes which we have on the capital market side. So I have to be honest, more professional applications which have no experience in capital markets hard. If there is
Mm.
not a clear outline of their true interest in this industry and really, really proof that they understand terms, that they understand fundamentals, that there is pure fire in their heart, yeah, for what we're doing here. Um,
Mhm.
and I think if that is what we see, then of course a pivot is possible. But the risk is very high that you're just gonna be pushed out even in the application process if that is not evidenced in your application. So pivoting is really not easy. Yeah, I have to be
Yeah.
honest. You have to have
Yeah.
some kind of foundation to build it on.
Definitely. And also that being said, I mean, I have seen not into capital markets, but people from other industries make pivots into technical roles
Mhm.
in finance. Agree with you 100% on, the person sitting in that recruiter's chair needs to see the connection. And when there are 1,000 applications coming in, which right now in the environment that we're in honestly is the case. If I have 2% even of candidates who have some kind of industry match or even a strong industry match, then they're much, much more likely to be invited into an interview than somebody who is a career pivoter. So right now in the environment that we're in, I'm really trying to encourage people to lean into an industry match where they've had some kind of experience in the past, regardless of at what level. Even if you're a cashier, you gain some experience of retail, and then that could be information and knowledge that you use to gain a role in the retail industry.
I have to agree. Maybe just one thing to add to this is, um, I mean, I worked at Mastercard, right? After I worked at BCG, and I think if you differentiate a little bit the finance industry as you outlined,
Yeah.
everybody understands what a credit card is. And I mean, everybody understands what maybe a retail account is.
Mhm.
And so, if you're thinking about financial roles in classical banks with products that we use in an everyday environment, and you, as a normal person, even if you're not in finance, understanding what this product is and you've used it
Mhm.
and you know what you're talking about, I think a pivot is definitely possible with such, I would say, basic financial services products. I think
Right.
capital markets is really very specialized, but you are right. There are many, many more jobs in the traditional finance than actually in capital markets because there are so many
Mhm.
banks, right? There are so
Right,
many
right.
insurances. It's not as if capital markets is, let's say, the in terms of market share or our number of positions, something that is definitely more than traditional finance. So you are right in that
Mhm.
sense. It potentially is much easier to pivot in that direction because there is much more intuition also as a just normal person for the products that are being offered to your clientele in retail banking, for instance.
Mhm. Absolutely. So a lot of times, data professionals who start out at that analyst role, maybe as a data scientist role, and they want to move into different areas, like become more of, either just go up on the ladder and become like a manager or director level, or maybe are looking to pivot into something like data engineering or data architecture. What are some of the what are some of the hot topics that they should really be aware of today in order to be able to talk to others at a level and understand like broader concepts that will help them pivot into the roles. So I think, for example, some of the topics that are kind of, hot and important today are like automation, like you mentioned, on-prem versus cloud versus multi-cloud, cost of compute, different types of systems, AI infrastructure, security and compliance. So what are some of the concepts that they should be focusing on today?
I think that's a great question, to be honest, because if you look at the evolution of employees over time and them becoming more senior, it's not that they become um, even better at what they are doing, right? It's not that
Mm,
as if expertise just in the thing that you're doing now is going to
yeah,
make you being promoted. Um,
right.
I believe it's two things. One, I said it before, is this can-do attitude and show that you take leadership and get things done. I think this kind of
Mm,
attitude will definitely push you forward. But now talking more, maybe more about the skill set and technical understanding that you were alluding to now in your question. Look, there are so many different technologies that actually come up every year, new concepts. Let's, for instance, take in the data space, we had databases, then we had data lakes, then we had the lakehouse architecture. And now we're talking about lake base, I don't know, on Databricks. Yeah.
right.
These are evolutions where something comes up every year. And from a
Mm,
business perspective, it is completely impossible to actually grasp these kind of evolutions without somebody can understand what actually the nuances are. And
mhm,
also different providers bring new solutions, new buzzwords, new shiny things to the market every year. And I
right.
think it's so hard from a technology perspective to invest into something and then understand that actually it is outdated maybe a couple of years after you very really really built it. So
Mm,
having a grasp of how different components within your firm interact with each other, what strengths and weaknesses of those are, how the architecture that you have actually built from a technology and also data foundation really meshes with each other, how maybe new concepts that are brought in will interact with your tech and data stack in terms of cost, in terms of benefit. If you have more than just the expertise in this one area, yeah, but at the end evolve and understand what the foundations are to actually gain business value, to actually make an impact
mm,
on customers, on the revenues, on the cost of the business, that you're driven not only by your code or your analytics, but on what really drives this company forward. Then, even as a technologist, even as a data scientist, even in whatever role you are in this, let's say, more technical sphere, you can do the next step. But you first have to show that you're willing to take responsibility for things that at the end needs to be done, that you
right.
have the possibility to connect the dots. I mean, as you said it, you have named the critical topics. How do we move from on-prem to the cloud? It's super hard in some senses. Yeah. Um,
Mm,
what's the best path forward if I want to connect two different businesses that I've just acquired into my new ecosystem and gain the synergies that I want? Suddenly,
mm,
you're connected to different environments and have to ensure that there is interoperability. You need
mhm,
technologists and data experts that have this kind of, at the end, judgment call that I would say from a business perspective I have on a technology level. And if you gain this over time, then I am very sure that people will realize that you are a really, really good person to go to get the answers that we need for really moving to the next level. And then promotions and also evolutions will come. But you have to have both the soft skills and the can-do attitude and this looking beyond your plate and seeing things interconnectedly. And if you do that, then I'm actually very, very sure that you will be able to move up the ladder.
wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And I know that we're getting close on time here, and you know that I like to end on a hot take. That being said, Reza Dorfard, what
Mhm.
is your hot take?
Okay, so I think we haven't talked that much about AI, so my hot take has to be a little bit about artificial intelligence. I mean, I have to
Yes.
say that I sincerely believe that, specifically from a data science and a data analytics perspective, it will be unbelievably important that whoever is in this career path understands what process steps in their everyday work can be made easier, can be automated, can in some way be done better with the different software lifecycle, but also artificial intelligence tools in the data science sphere. And I think also for everybody that maybe today is not a data scientist and maybe wants to get into this role because they are
Mm,
maybe data savvy or have some kind of mathematical skills and want to actually go in this direction. I think it's so important that you capture the opportunities that you have to jumpstart your learning, to jumpstart your speed when you do your analytics, to jumpstart the quality of your work by leveraging the different AI tools that are at your disposal. And I know maybe it sounds like what everybody would say, but I'm still seeing that there are some people, even who are unbelievably into data, that still refrain from using these tools because maybe they believe it's
mm,
cheating. Maybe they believe it will get, I don't know, not the recognition because it has been supported by AI. Maybe because they just feel as if a competition with themselves. Yeah. But
mhm,
I can tell you the only thing that a manager, a decision maker is interested in is the unit cost of analytics. It is how fast and how cost intensive has it been to get this piece of intelligence or this piece of data out. And if you can do it better than somebody else by leveraging the best tools at your disposal, you are spot on. So therefore, don't be afraid of using everything at your disposal and even push your area, push your business, push your tech department to give you what you need to be better at your job. And this will definitely be recognized and at the end also valued. And invest into your own capabilities to actually every day and every month get better with new shiny things that come out. So that would be my hot take. Yeah. Don't be lazy, invest the
wonderful.
time.
Be bold, use AI.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, I am so appreciative of the time that you've taken to speak to me and the audience out there today. I know that everyone's going to get a lot of great nuggets and ultimately land better jobs or land jobs better because of having heard this conversation. So I really, really
I think
appreciate
they're
it so
going to
much.
land better jobs because of you and the really, really great suggestions that you make. I mean, I love your LinkedIn posts. So thank you very much for that. I'm a big follower.
Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Goodbye.